Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mark Booker, the current student body president, and welcome all to Prairie A&M University, an institution of the first class as described in the Texas Constitution, founded in 1876. It was once a slave plantation, now produces black engineers, black nurses, black architects, black teachers, black musicians, black poets, and many more. Teaching to Transgress, a conversation of activism, writing, and HBCUs. I would say this is the backbone of Prairie. For years, we have fought for our rights, marched to the polls, increased voter registration, and spoke up about social injustice as students. Progress can only be measured if you track from where we first started. Earlier today, Dr. Simmons made a comment, which I will use as a quote going forward, and she said, "When we claim what is ours, we could never fail." I think that speaks volume to the grounds of Prairie. If we never spoke up or marched for what we're entitled to, who knows where we would have been. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, welcome to Prairie A&M University.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Dory Gilbert, Dean of the Marvin D. and June Samuel Brailsford College of Arts and Sciences. The Brailsford College of Arts and Sciences is very privileged to be the organizational home of both the Ruth J. Simmons Center for Race and Justice and the Toni Morrison Writing Program. Both initiatives were launched last year, and I think we will all agree that they were launched right on time. Recent statistics show that students are ready for real conversations in the classroom. Since 2020, nationally, the number of students expressing interest in fields associated with social justice has spiraled upward. According to a survey by Best Colleges last year, 72% of undergraduates reported that their awareness of social justice issues had increased, and nearly half reported that their involvement in social justice efforts was impacting their career choices. At a time when the world is forced to face the realities of social inequities on so many fronts, students are looking to the classroom to be a space for truth, knowledge, conversation, and reflection on all these important issues. Our Morrison Writing Program and our Center for Race and Justice are meeting this call from our students. The Toni Morrison Writing Program was established in honor of the writer and her former student, philanthropist Mackenzie Scott. The program upholds the legacy of African American writers, especially those educated at HBCUs. The Morrison program brings visibility to the importance of writing at a time when African Americans represent just 5% of the book publishing industry. The ultimate goal in writing in the humanities is to explain or understand the human experience and human values. That is to capture the experience of what makes us human. Our students have spent a year learning this craft from the master teacher and inaugural writer-in-residence, Nikki Giovanni. Nikki Giovanni has taught a master class, met virtually with students on our campus, in the community. She has delivered lectures, including a reading to celebrate the birthday of Toni Morrison, held in February of this year. She also met this morning with grade school students, signed books, and I'm sure that was a lovely, lovely event. Her books and writings lift us up, transport us, they make us laugh, and they also keep us grounded in the broader topic of social justice, which connects to the mission of the Center for Race and Justice. To draw from a quote of the esteemed Nikki Giovanni, "If now isn't a good time for the truth, I don't see when we'll get to it." For the Center for Race and Justice, our activists and residents Dr. Melina Abdullah, has taught and mentored our students at the Student Activist Lunch and Learn. She's worked closely with our Simmons Center scholars and campus student leaders, training them on important readings and emphasizing the long history of activism. She led our students and faculty in the Campus Voting Rights March, and there will be other events planned for this week. As the heart of any university, the College of Arts and Sciences is tasked with developing the whole student. Our mission is to broaden and enrich each student's intellectual and cultural background and elevate their writings, their speech, their critical thinking skills, regardless of their major or career goals. Over this past year, our writer in residence, our activists in residence have brought new energy to this mission through their powerhouse teachings. We have welcomed them as part of the extended Panther family, and as they have engaged our students in deep learning, they have developed their skills beyond their basic study to become active, informed citizens through meaningful writing and intentional activism. Throughout this inaugural year, we have embraced a new wave of commitment to educate, to arouse. To be clear, now is a time to help our students empathize, reimagine, think broadly, examine critically, and engage in research, speech, writings, and practices that help transform our society. How fortunate we are now to experience a conversation between our writer in residence and our activist in residence to delve deeper into how we teach and engage our students effectively. So prepare yourself to be challenged, informed, and inspired by their words and work. Now is the best time to start preparing the next generation of change agents. Now is a good time for the truth.
Now we're going to hear from our mayor, Mayor Brian Rowland.
Good afternoon. I bring you greetings on the day, April 12th, 1969. The city of Prairie View was incorporated. So yesterday, we celebrated 53 years of being an incorporated city here in Waller County, Texas. So that deserves a round of applause. I'd like to welcome all of our guests, President Dr. Simmons, Dr. Jonah Thomas Smith, and all faculty, staff, and students. The city of Prairie View is home of Prairie View University. We're a proud community. Our continued growth can be attributed to dedicated and visionary city administrative staff and support from Prairie View University's faculty and staff and students. Coupled with involved community members, committed businesses, and partners, we understand working together to prepare the city of Prairie View for the next generation of innovation and technology. I brought two proclamations. One, because I wanted to first recognize Dr. Melina Abdullah, and whereas this proclamation says the city of Prairie View has a long, rich, and proud history of building a culture of welcoming hospitality for the people from all countries, regions, and cultures. Whereas the progressive city government is committed to the growth, prosperity, and well-being of citizens of Prairie View, Texas. Since its inception in 1969, it is a community that has welcomed and recognized cultural contributions that have been made to society. Whereas Melina Abdullah is a professor and former chair of the Pan-African Studies at California State University, Los Angeles. Dr. Abdullah is the author of numerous articles and book chapters, its subjects ranging from political coalition building to womanistic mothering. Dr. Abdullah is a leader in the fight for ethnic studies in K-12 and university systems, and was a part of the historic victory that made ethnic studies a requirement in the Los Angeles Unified School District. Dr. Abdullah is a recognized expert on race, gender, class, and the social movement, and she was among the original group of organizers that convened to form the Black Lives Matter and continued to serve in the Los Angeles chapter. Therefore, as the mayor and the city council of the city of Prairie View, in support of this educational growth and development of the citizens of our great city, and in support of community actions which advance ongoing efforts to be a community of progressive change, we do by here recognize Dr. Melina Abdullah for her continued activism and leadership. We also have a proclamation in recognition to Ms. Nikki Giovanni. Again, many of you know Ms. Giovanni has honorably served as the African American literature community by devoting her time, passion, and gifts to people nationwide. Ms. Giovanni's early work gained attention as part of the Black arts movement. She was called the poet of the Black Revolution because of her forceful and passionate writing about civil rights. Her varied activism includes providing support for African American women writers. Ms. Giovanni is also an award-winning author, poet, writer, and activist who has won numerous awards over her career, including the Langston Hughes Medal and the NAACP Image Awards, and has been named a living legend by Oprah Winfrey. Mrs. Giovanni has dedicated her life to teaching people of all ages, including her teaching career at Queens College, Rutgers University, Ohio State, Virginia Tech, at those universities, and recently joined the Toni Morrison writing program at Prairie View A&M University as a writer in residence at the start of the 2021-2022 academic school year. So therefore, as the mayor, Brian Rowland, the city of Prairie View, in support of the educational growth and development of the citizens of this great city, and support community actions which advance ongoing efforts by the community of progressive change, I do by here proclaim this day, the city of Prairie View, April 13th, 2022, Nikki Giovanni Day in the city of Prairie View, Texas. Every day is Dr. Ruth Simmons Day.
My name is James Palmer, the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, and I have the privilege of introducing our speakers. We have done an amazing job of doing that already, so I think we're going to just move along if that's okay. The proclamation gave you a lot of what these individuals have accomplished. The one that has not been introduced yet is our moderator, so I want to read a little bit about her. Our moderator today is our very own Melanie Price, endowed professor and inaugural director of the Ruth J. Simmons Center for Race and Justice. She leads the university's African American Studies Initiative, which is funded by the Mellon Foundation. Price is the author of 2 books, The Race Whisperer, Barack Obama and the Political Uses of Race, and Dreaming Blackness, Black Nationalism and African American Public Opinion. Like those on the stage with her today, which I invite to come up now, she is an HBCU graduate, having earned her BA from the Prairie View A&M University and her MA and PhD from the Ohio State University. Before coming to Prairie View, Price was an associate professor of Africana Studies and Political Science at Rutgers. She is a regular contributor to the New York Times and provides political commentary for TV, radio, and magazines. We welcome each to the stage today. If you have not already done so, please silence your cell phones, and we will get started.
I think it's on, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, you can tell now.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. I was going to say the same thing you said I was going to invite everybody to silence their phones, unless you're waiting for a transplant or something. Leave it on. Outside of the kidney, I think you should silence your cell phones for this hour or so while we talk. Let me say what an honor it is to be in conversation with you both. One of you, Melina Abdullah, I've known for years because we share a profession and a discipline in common. The other, Nikki Giovanni, whose name I've known, I think, as long as I knew what a poet was. So it is really exciting. So I want to start by expressing my gratitude to you both that you agreed to be the inaugural writer and activist in residence. Residencies are new for us here, and in many ways you have set the standard for what that looks like going forward, and I think it's a high bar that others will have to cross. So thank you so much. So let's begin at the beginning. Often when I see an elder, now? Okay. Often, wrong way. Okay. Often when I see an elder in my family, they like to tell stories that suggest they always knew I am where I should be, right? They could tell when you were a little girl, even though it was something innocuous that probably didn't matter at the time. And I'm wondering, as I was thinking about both of you, what were the things that people saw in you and nurtured as a kid that led to you becoming a writer, an activist, a political person? I'm going to start with you, Ms. Giovanni.
I have no idea. I'm a baby sister, and I think baby sisters are always the people who look. We survey. We are surveillance. I almost named my last book that. And I had a big sister who, we were talking about her recently, but my big sister was, first of all, she had dimples, she was pretty, she had clear skin, she could play the piano, she could sing, she could dance. And people would say to me, like, Nikki, can you read? And I'd say, no, but Gary can. Her name was Gary. No, but Gary can. Nikki, can you play the piano? No, but Gary can, which, delighted me. And I think baby sisters are always looking up to the big sisters. I really don't, I don't know. I think that there's, and probably because I'm old and maybe a little more cynical than I used to be, but I think there's a lot of pressure being put on people to, like, somebody should have known that you were worth a shit, when you were 3 years old.
Right.
Excuse me, Ruth. And, they don't. And you're going to have to define yourself. And I think that's important. And now, because I am old, I'm 78, one of the things my parents, and she liked him, so it had nothing to, I had to realize that my parents' marriage had nothing to do with me. Because if you would ask me, and I've said this before, then you'd ask me what I'm doing at 11 o'clock at night, I'm listening to my father hit my mother. And I finally realized, well, this has nothing to do with me. And so I was very fortunate I had a grandmother, but I'm grandmother prone anyway. And I was able to go to Knoxville, where I was born, and I lived with my grandparents. I didn't have to be bothered with them anymore. And there was kind of like a pressure that they put on him. Ultimately, of course, my father died. That's a longer situation, but when he died, Mommy called me, so I knew then that she didn't call to tell me that my father had a stroke and was probably going to die. She called for another reason, because that's one of those things you have to think it through. No, she called because she needed a daughter. I'm very, I have a son and I like him. I think sons are nice, but I do. But daughters, there are just times you need daughters. And so I moved back home, and I ended up writing a poem in my next to the last book, and it's called I Married My Mother, which I pretty much did. We lived together, I don't know if this is answering your question. I did, and I still do, dislike opinions. And the reason that I could get along with my mother is that I didn't have an opinion about her marriage, which was only fair, so I didn't want her to have an opinion about my life. So we got along very well because she knew if I wanted to know her opinion, I would ask. And so if I didn't ask, I didn't want to hear it. And so, I don't know if that had anything to do. I don't know. I never asked my mother if she even read my books.
Oh, wow.
No, because I didn't care what she thought about them. It was what I was doing.
Yeah.
And if you start asking people and then they give you an opinion, then you don't like them. Then you try to explain to them, well, I did it for this reason. Well, you don't want to do that. And I feel sorry for singers. I've always felt sorry for singers because singers come out and they want to sing, and then they want an opinion about how did they sound. And it's a dangerous thing because then somebody said, well, I really didn't like the way. You don't want that. You want them to say, I was wonderful.
Right.
And the best way to avoid the people that are not going to say that is not to ask them. Did I?
Yeah. I don't know how relevant this is, but sometimes when I ask friends to read stuff for me, before they offer their critique, I say something good about it first, and then I can hear the rest of it. I need a compliment first, and then I will hear your critiques. They all think it's nuts, but it is how I need to live my life. How about you, Melina?
Well, I'm going to just comment on that. Our friend Regina Freer calls that the FU sandwich, right? So you say nice, the criticism, nice. And then you can digest what's in the middle, right? Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. I did have a mother. I have a mother who will offer her opinion honestly, but also delights in everything that not just her children, but almost any child does, right? So when I was very young, like 3 or 4, she used to give me, I had a silver baton, and she would have me march around the coffee table and sing to the Mickey Mouse Club, who's the leader of them all? And she'd go, more feeling, Melina, more feeling. And I would march around the coffee table. I can still recite, and I shared this with you. She put me in oratorical contests. And I can still I won't do the whole thing, but I was born in the Congo. I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx, right? I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light.
I wonder if you went on YouTube, you could probably find children from places all everywhere performing that.
All 3 of my children, we all have it memorized, right?
Yeah.
So my mother started it, right? I memorized it. I made my daughters memorize it. But my mother delighted in that. I also grew up across the street from my grandparents and my grandfather. I think this is really important for Black girls especially. I have a grandfather who thought I could walk on water. And I was his old top. That's what he called me. Hey, old top. And anything I did was perfect. And I think in a world that tries to turn Black women into mules, it's really important that we have people in our lives who tell us that we're not mules, who teach us to take up space. And my mother and my grandmother and my grandfather taught me to take up space. I don't know if they imagined that I would be sitting next to Nikki Giovanni one day, but they taught me to take up space, and I try to nurture that in the children that I work with and my own children as well.
So both of you went to HBCUs. I haven't mentioned here before because I'm thinking about you last night. One's a Delta, one's an AKA. Because you were talking about the Deltas last night, I remember that, and one's an AKA. So you both pledged there. I imagine it was a significant part of your life. I'm always wondering now that I work here, as opposed to being a student here, what do you think now about attending that HBCU? In what ways was it formative for you? How did it shape your life, do you think?
Well, for me, first of all, I didn't pledge. I didn't join Delta until I was grown, and I think my second book. And Lillian Bimbo was the president of Delta, and she invited me to join. And I think that was the year that she invited Aretha, because she became a part of it. Cecily Tyson was our, so Lillian brought in a lot of different people, and I really did love Lillian a lot. And because I'm probably half crazy, one of the things that I brought to Lillian was extraordinary, do something crazy. do something that hasn't been done. So one of the things that the Deltas in this room know is we bought a satellite, because I like space, and in talking to Lil, it's like, you ought to buy a satellite. You Delta, you got some money, we have an argument, buy a satellite. And we did. We bought, Delta's own a satellite.
To do
we
what
have
with?
not figured out, we haven't, what we want to do with it. But as humans go into space, one of the things that you will run into is and this is not about just the Delta, but you will run into our satellites. Because one of the things that I helped Delta do was, we are the future. And the future is going to be in the galaxy. And so that's a part of my responsibility to mine. I attended Fisk and ultimately graduated. I got kicked out of school my first semester there. And, well, it's no big deal. Everybody makes a mistake. And I think mistakes are good ideas, by the way. Because if you never make a mistake, you either never tried to do something or you're too dumb to know that it was a mistake, whichever one you take what you want from that. But I did get kicked out of school, but I was in school with John Lewis. And John was a Fiskite. John and Diane Nash and James Bevel left Fisk to join Dr. King. As you know, Diane Nash, who did not ever and has not gotten, if credit is what we're looking for, the credit for one of the founders of SNCC. But they all went and joined Dr. King. And when I came back, because it was a mistake, you realize, oh, I made a mistake. And so a year later, I came back to Fisk and made whatever amends one tries to make for, yes, I got kicked out, but what am I going to do? I can't sing, I can't dance. I could read by that time, but I needed to go back. My grandfather graduated Fisk in 1905, married, for those of us who are in this room, a Spelman woman. But then when he went back home, we're from Albany, Georgia. So you know that it's Georgia because it's Albany. And he went back home to Albany, Georgia with his wife and saw my grandmother. And that was that. He fell in love with grandmother. And if you've seen The Godfather, you'll remember when Michael meets his first wife, and Michael just goes like, and that's going to be it. Remember? I mean, Michael is totally in love with her. And Grandpapa fell in love with grandmother, which meant, of course, that he had to get a divorce, because he would say, when I was living with them, I was washing the dishes. And he would sit and keep me company while I washed dishes. And he'd say, Nikki, I only wanted to kiss your grandmother. And no matter where she was in the house, and it was not that big a house, but no matter where she was, she would hear him. And she'd say, John Brown, if I had let you kiss me, you would have never married me. And it took me the longest before I understood, oh, that's a metaphor. I was old before I realized, oh, that's not what he actually meant.
Right.
And so, but he had to get a divorce because that was the only way he was going to get to kiss her. And they had 3 daughters. My mother is the oldest one. And it was just, you're asking, you're trying to figure out what's important. Well, obviously, college is important. Grandpapa was Dr. Ruth is a French scholar. You were a French scholar, if I'm not mistaken. And Grandpapa was a Latin scholar. And knowing another language is incredibly important. And I've only recently, I don't do as much research as I should. I know things that I know I have not put together. Is that a bad way of saying it? But one of the things that I've been looking into is what did the Latin scholars contribute to the civil rights movement? But civil rights movement is going back to Thurgood Marshall, not going back to Frederick Douglass, going back to Thurgood Marshall. And one of the things that we've discovered that I think is fascinating and wonderful is that the Latin people, I don't know about the French people, I haven't been able to get into that, but the Latin scholars helped translate because the law is written in Latin. So you had these Latin scholars, like my grandfather, who looked like, there's not a white man in Knoxville, we were in Knoxville, who thought Grandpapa did anything. They thought it was just, Mr. Watson was wonderful, he was calm and everything. But what Grandpapa was doing, among other people, was translating the Latin part of law, passing it to the Pullman porters, who were the most important people one of the most important people in the civil rights movement that we hear nothing about were the Pullman Porters. And they would pass along, and they would call Thurgood, they called him the boy, actually. Tell the boy that this is what this might mean, and this is another level, and the Greeks thought it this way. And they would pass that information, which became Brown versus Board of Education, which is why we actually ended up winning it for what the Latin scholars did. He graduated in 1905, as I said. So I went to Fisk, and it was just like, oh, I need to not embarrass my family. And so I finally did graduate, and without boring everybody. But the year that I graduated, John had come back because it was the same year that Selman, and they had split his head open. He was, but he was still injured. And when John, we graduated, Fisk is only 500 people, if that many. And so we're in the chapel, and I saw John. I walked over to say to John how proud, because John had left Fisk to do something important, and I left Fisk because I was a fool. But
you all came back.
Well, you know, but
at the same moment,
yes. You know, you recognize you were a fool, and then it makes it easy on you and everybody else. And I went over and reached out to hold his hand to say, John, we're so proud of you. And Fisk calls you out by letter. So we were into G's at that point, and they said Giovanni, and I was holding his hand. So John and I ended up walking down the chapel together. Wow. And every time I would see John, I'd say, you remember that we walked down the chapel together at Fisk? And he said, of course, Nikki, I remember that. I said, John, you're such a politician. I can't believe he remembered that. But I do, and it was so wonderful that in that strange way that the universe does things. We both came to Fisk, we both got kicked out, well, left at the same time, and ended up, Fisk ended up giving him his, I don't say giving, but he got his degree. And we pretty much did give it, because nobody's gonna ask him to come and take a math class. I mean, he's John Lewis, and so it was time that we recognized Fisk need to, and Fisk has other issues, even now. You know, you guys got, and you're so lucky, you got Ruth. And I would have given anything to have had you be the president of Fisk University. I can't even begin to tell you, because we needed someone with that vision. That's why Fisk is having we don't have a vision at Fisk. And I'm just being honest about it, you know, not that anybody gives a damn. But if we could have gotten you, the university would grow in a different way. And right now, we just haven't had a president who has the university at heart. We've had people there who are saying, well, what's it going to do for me?
Right.
And I don't know if you people and I mean no disrespect on you people, but Prairie View is so lucky to have somebody who cares about Prairie View. And Fisk has not had a president since Walter Leonard. And a good one who cared about Fisk, and you know Dr. Leonard. And that's what held us together. And we just don't have it right now. Right now we have people who have come in who only care about themselves. And you can't run an institution if you care about yourself. You can only have an institution if you love the institution. And that's what leadership is about. And I'm sure that you all know that. And some of you will end up being leaders of something. And if you are, you have to care about what you're leading. You can't care about, oh, I'm going to make $1 here, or I'm going to get to be this. You have to care about what you're doing. You know, I mean, you have to care about the institution. And we at Fisk right now, you know, it's amazing because your students were helping to serve us, because you're teaching them to cook. I would give anything for Fisk University to have a culinary school. It would be the most wonderful thing in the world, because we are a liberal arts school, and one of the ways that we meet and greet and get to know people is through food. Everybody, and we're such a small college, everybody who comes to Fisk should have to work in the kitchen, learning to cook and learning to serve. And then, because I happen to like, and we're going to a restaurant tonight, Lily's, but I like white tablecloths, so they ought to learn to put a white tablecloth on. They ought to learn what they would have learned at, for example, Starbucks. Because the reason everybody loves Starbucks, I don't know, you people don't seem to have one, which I can't imagine, but where we are, where I teach, we have 4. So you can imagine. But everybody in Starbucks, good morning, how you doing today? Oh, it's good to see you. And at some of them, because one of them is run by a friend of mine, Ryan, and they know when I say good morning, it's, hey, Nikki, how's it going? And they know my order. That's leadership that he has taught them. Know your customer.
Right.
Well, my customers are you all. So my job is to tell you what I know, right?
Right.
You're my customer. So you have to know who your audience is. I could say it that way. I would give anything to have Richard Williams come to Fisk and teach our girls to play tennis.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I would do I don't know what we would, anything to have them do that. But we also know that there are no black women really playing golf.
Yeah.
And I would do anything to have the Nashville Country Club. And somebody say, oh, it's nothing but a whole bunch of white men. They are. I know that. I'm old. I know that there's nothing but a whole bunch of white men. And I know that old white men like pretty black women. They do. And I would just love to have our Fisk girls go over, because they're not fools. And anybody somebody calls you and says, come by at midnight, I'm gonna help you get your career in movies started. Well, you're a fool. Because you go at midnight, you know damn well what he's gonna get. You know that. But we're talking about just going over and learning to play golf.
Right.
Because Tiger Woods not gonna teach you to play golf, because he doesn't care. We need somebody who's gonna take that on. And I'm always just so sad to see that Fisk has not come up to the modern world. We're still fighting over things that could not possibly matter. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
That doesn't answer your question.
Doesn't matter. I love the answer you gave. So, Melina, let's bring Howard into this. So you are a student of Howard, and interestingly, you also have a daughter at Howard.
Yeah.
In what ways do you think that place shaped you? How did it change your outlook on sort of on the larger world?
Howard made me who I am in many ways. So I was born in Oakland, California in the 1970s, and that makes me 29 years old.
Yes.
And I came of age in the 90s. And East Oakland, I'm from East Oakland, right? And East Oakland in the 90s was plagued by drugs. A lot of my friends had been murdered, gone to prison, were, in trouble. I'm grateful again and let me say this, because we talk about like neighborhoods like mine, only in terms of what systems, white supremacist systems did to those neighborhoods. Let me also say my grandfather still lived across the street. My grandfather still had his garage up all summer. My grandmother made sure we had, all the kids in the neighborhood had what they called Polly Pop, other folks called Kool-Aid and tea cakes there. Like you'd be playing all day and you dip in the garage and you get a little snack and keep playing. We traveled in the neighborhood as a pack of kids, right? Like nothing ever happened to us because 20 of us walked to school together, right? We made our weekends full, even though our parents didn't have money to vacation with us. We had the most wonderful summers, fence hopping, stealing plums, being together. And I'm lifting that because people look at our neighborhoods a lot of times and only talk about the sadness and trauma, but we also have to uplift the beauty and creativity of our neighborhoods and our people and all that make up that community. So I want to lift that up. But I will say that the institutions that were underfunded in the 90s, right? Like we say defund the police, they've been defunded in the schools, right? Our schools were defunded when I was young, right? We went to we had starved neighborhoods. And so what that meant for me is even though my mother was an elementary school teacher, I dropped out of high school. I don't know if I ever told you that, did I?
Have,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I dropped out of high school and, you know, thought I modeled hair at the time. Like, I don't know who thinks they're gonna be a famous hair model. There's like none, right?
Especially not pre-Instagram.
Yes,
right, no.
But that's what I was doing. Thankfully, I went to independent studies. I went back to regular high school in the 12th grade because I wanted to have a prom. Because I modeled hair, right? I wanted to show off my hair at the prom, right? But I applied to Howard, and I don't think they knew that independent studies gives everyone straight A's, right? And so I think my junior year tricked them, right? And they let me in.
Because it had a name that wasn't like alternative school for bad kids. It had a It had
now everybody name. Knows independent studies is the kids that dropped out that were getting their GEDs, right?
Yes.
But I went to Howard, and it was the first time in my life. You're talking about the 90s, right? What was beautiful is we didn't see white people. I probably didn't see a white person for the first 2 months. That's when DC was still Chocolate City, right? And I'm not saying that because I dislike white people. I'm saying that because there's something that comes, and y'all know this, with being among all Black folks, where you get to really nurture who you are, right? Where there's not other forces kind of telling you who you are. You get to nurture who you are. What I loved about Howard is what my professors, what the security guards, what the secretaries, what everybody saw in me is what my grandfather and my mother saw in me, right? They wanted me to do well. So I didn't have any money, but the security guards made sure I ate. They pack up the leftover chicken from some event and make sure I ate, right? The people who worked in the dorms gave me jobs in the mail room and at the front desk. And everybody was rooting for me. And my freshman year, because our schools were starved, I never learned to write in high school. I mean, I could write, but I didn't know how to write, the structure of writing. And I had a professor, Homero Learns, Mr. Learns. He did not have an advanced degree. He had a master's, not a PhD. But you do this diagnostic exam when you first go into freshman English, and I failed. And Mr. Learns, I don't know where he got a British accent because he's from Philly, right? But he said, Miss Melina, you will not go into that classroom. You will come and sit with me during my office hours, and I will teach you how to write. And every day I sat in his office, and he taught me how to write to the point that now I'm a professor. I get paid to write.
Right.
And so I'm just giving this long example or examples of what HBCUs do for you, right? I would not be who I am had I not gone to Howard University, had I not had Mr. Learns, had I not had an entire campus of folks who saw me the way my mother, the way my grandfather, the way that the people in my neighborhood, Miss Rose, who sat on the porch and made sure that little pack of kids didn't get into too much trouble, the way that they saw us, that's the way that everyone at Howard saw us and nurtured us into who we were to become.
So I've been talking to some of my students about the transition in college from being a student of a thing to being an actual thing. That is, you study engineering to being an engineer, right? And there's something that has to happen around the time you graduate that you have to stop saying you're an engineering major and start saying, I'm an engineer, right? And I wonder if there was a point where you knew, I am a writer, I am an activist, right? Where it became really real for you. I'm gonna start with you, Melina, when you realize I am an activist, this is a thing that I am meant to do.
I was never not an activist. So Oakland in the 1970s, everybody's an activist. There's a consciousness, raised with this consciousness. I think probably by sophomore year at Howard, I had begun to, I felt it happening, merge, because for a minute I was, what is that, schizophrenia, where you're more than one. When I would go back home to Oakland, I was the old Melina, And when I would come back to Howard,
Yeah.
I was this, Melina who read books, My sophomore year, those two people began to merge. I became a student organizer. I was doing work in community in DC. And I think I was always an activist, always an organizer, but recognized that it's part of my identity, part of the who I am kind of at that point. And it was nurtured at Howard and continued through the rest of my life.
Right. How about you, Ms. Giovanni? When did you know?
Nikki.
Nikki, when did you know for sure writing is going to be?
I don't know that I do. I just know that I don't do anything else. And I'm always thrilled that somebody says I'm an activist, but what I am is a watcher. I watch, and whether I'm sitting here in this room, I'm watching, and there are some people I will not remember, but there are some people I have already recognized some things, and I'd see you in 20 years, and I will remember that I saw you. I may not remember exactly where, but I say I know that face, and I've made some judgments about some of the faces that I'm looking at. It's positive. I mean, I don't it mean nothing to me, but in terms of what I do, I watch, because I'm a writer. And so when we talk about activism, I watched. We were talking about John, who was a sweetheart. I watched John leave campus to go change the world. And I made a judgment that he did the right thing. I didn't follow him. Maybe I should have. If I had been a real activist, I would have gone with John and Diane. But I watched. And then I watched what they did. And then I judged that they did the correct. Am I making sense?
Yes.
And it's always been important to me to watch. And as I said, just going back to my parents' marriage, which I'm now dealing with at 79, I watched what that was. And I had to step away from that. And I realized, okay, what I do is I watch. And I recognize what I have something to say and do about and what I don't. And I did say earlier, and I'll say it again, I hate an opinion. So I'm very proud that people said nice things to you all, because I really don't give a damn what anybody thinks about anything that I say. No, that's the truth.
Has that always been the case?
From as far as I know, the day I was born.
What a blessing.
No, I did not ever want anybody giving me an opinion. I don't know how to say. That's all I know is that and maybe maybe I wasn't healthy. Maybe mentally this wasn't good. But these are not things I know.
It feels to me like I was thinking last night, this must be a joy.
Yeah.
Like to be that free of other people's assumptions about
They'll make you unhappy.
Yeah. It will.
You start listening. No, you start listening to other people, and you wonder what's wrong with you, and then you want to change to make it something that somebody you don't even know approves of, and you don't even like them. I'm amazed that kids get what is that thing, Facebook thing, and they read it,
Instagram,
and they judge themselves by somebody they don't even know.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
And you think, well, how can it? I can't be bothered with people I know.
So let me ask y'all this, and I suspect I have a sense of what your answer would be, but look, there's a thing that happens when kids come to college, especially lots of our kids who are first generation college students. I mean, you talked about it a little bit, where there is a person they become at college that is different than the person they were at home, and sometimes makes them different than the people at home, right? And so they have to figure out how they live in these two worlds, right? How they live in a different financial realm than their family, how they live with more education sometimes than their families. How do you think you have been able to make community across economic lines, across?
It wasn't my problem. We didn't. It wasn't like we were rich or anything. But first of all, as I say, Grandpapa was a Latin scholar. Grandmother had graduated from Albany normal school, so I come from my mother and father were Knoxville College graduates. That wasn't my problem. We didn't have any any money, but I didn't know that we were supposed to.
Right.
And so a lot of things that, no, you have to know that in order to want something. Mm-hmm. And I want very little. Even as I sit here with you, there are very few things that I want. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have to worry about not having it, because I didn't used to have it. And I said that I recently had a discussion with somebody who didn't understand that I meant it. And what I said was, I didn't have it before you offered it to me, and I don't want it now. Don't be bothered with you. And maybe, because sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
Be sucking up under these people because they offer you money.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes you work and you get it. But I am a part of two things that are important to me, and now I might add a third. I'm a part of Delta Sigma Theta, so I know that my sisters are not going to let me starve to death. They are not going to let me sleep under some rug. They're just not. I'm going to be able to knock on some Delta's door, and she's going to take me in. Now, other people may, but I know that. Mm-hmm. And I am a part of the Hokie family, and I have a great belief. We have a Hokie in the room. I have a great belief.
Hokie is Virginia Tech.
It's Virginia Tech, mm-hmm. and they're not going to let me be hungry. I just don't believe it. And maybe I'll starve to death. And as you see my body there, you say, see, that bitch said they weren't going to let it happen. But I don't believe it. I don't. So it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Because if it starts to bother you, you will change yourself.
That's right.
You will become something that you don't want to be. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I'm smarter than anybody. And my grandfather was quite brilliant. My grandmother was she was a very activist woman. Mm-hmm. She was one of those people, the church women, and she did all of that stuff. Right. But what was important is that I just wanted me. And I'm not friendly, so I didn't have a need. I'm not one of those people that I want to go to the party. I don't like parties. I don't even know how to tell you that.
This whole week has been one big party for you.
And I'm going to have a birthday soon. Mm-hmm. My birthday's in June. And I say I only have maybe 3 friends, and they say, oh, what can we do for your birthday? I said, at my age, maybe when I was 6, I wanted a birthday party and a candle, and I don't want any of that. I want to be home, and I do like champagne. I want to be home with my bottle of champagne, and I wouldn't mind if they come over and have a drink with me. Right. But I'm not one of those people like, oh, I need friends, because I don't. And thank the Lord, I don't need lovers because I'm old. Now, if I was younger, I might, but right now, I don't. And so I've just always wanted me. And I don't know how to say that. And any writer in this room, if you can't be lonely, if you can't be alone, if you can't watch, if you can't imagine, if you can't sit and read a book, and I would suggest history and science, and see where the future is taking you, you're not going to be a writer. You're going to always say, I tried to be a writer. They wouldn't publish my book. If they don't publish your book, you publish it yourself. And you say, I don't have any money. Everybody, we were laughing about it. Everybody stand on the corner for a half a day. You're going to get the money. No, you can't let other people determine what your life is.
Yeah.
And it's so basic. And if you're going to be a poet, the one thing you know is that you're not going to have any money, because poets don't make money. That's not what we do. The novelists, will sell their novel and they'll have a movie made and it'll be a terrible movie. But nonetheless, we've seen that. Talk about embarrassing. You look at some of those novels. Yeah.
I hadn't planned to say this, but Paris, stand-up Paris, is in my class. And she is a graphic design major, digital media arts major. She writes poetry books and designs the book covers and sells them on Amazon. I just learned that this week. This week, right? And that's part of the thing that you're talking about, how if you are meant to do a thing, you get it out there.
Yeah. I don't know about meant. I don't
You
like
don't know
that
about meant, but if you do
you're
it.
not meant. If you're interested, and then when you get uninterested, always tell you, and I don't give opinions, so let me give one opinion.
Yes.
There is a reason the pencil has an eraser. Always keep that in mind. And when you're tired of it, whether it's a friend, whether it's a boyfriend, whether it's your parents, whether it's your cousin, whatever it is, when you get tired of it, leave it. Otherwise, you'd be crazy trying to get along with somebody you don't even like.
Right.
That you know to be stupid. And that you know is trying to use you. They're just always buy yourself a yellow pencil. So when everything else fails, you can say, there's a reason, there's an eraser here. It'll keep you free.
I don't even know where I was in the conversation right now. I don't know. I want to ask you probably 2 questions, and then I want to give the audience the kids a time to ask. And one of them, I think, is sort of what you alluded to, I think, about failures or mistakes and the ways in which we often, I don't think we talk to kids enough about mistakes. Partially because, as professors, as people, there's a desire to not be vulnerable around them. But I have found that talking to kids about mistakes or failures, they often learn from them, but also they learn something new about you and what that means for them, right? That is, if you failed and you are in a place where I now respect, that means that I can fail and I end up. Do you have a story about a mistake or failure?
Who, me? I just said I got kicked out of school.
Oh, you did say that.
I did.
How about you, Melina? Do you have one that you want to share?
I have a lot of mistakes. And I think that mistakes are only mistakes if we don't learn the lessons from them. Right? If we don't see, you know who my ex-husband was.
I do.
Yes. Could be a mistake, or I got 3 kids, Could be a mistake, or I talked to somebody, there was an astrologer that I was talking with, and he asked me if I was married, and I said, I'm divorced. And he said, well, why are you divorced? And I said, I guess I married the wrong man. And he said, no, you married the right man. That's why you're divorced. And what he went on to talk about is how my life needs to be one where I'm not tethered to some man, especially not the man that I was tethered to, right? And so many would say that that was a mistake, but I'm also every day very, very grateful that he left me, right? Because I never would have left, right? So I was picking up my phone because I had to write down what you just said, right? When you get tired of it, leave, right? I didn't leave. I never would have left, but my ex-husband left. And every day I'm so grateful that he left. I talk with my daughters about how grateful they are that he left, because we wouldn't be who we've become had he not left. So I think that mistakes are only mistakes when you don't see the blessing or the lesson in those mistakes.
Yeah. The last question I want to ask, this panel is called Teaching to Transgress, after the book by Bell Hooks, who we lost recently. And I wanted to leave some time for you to maybe talk about the loss of Bell Hooks and just whatever you want to say and reflect about it.
I didn't know Bell that well, so I'm not very, very good at it. I did want to say, Ruth, to you, we were talking about Jesse Norman, and we were talking about what we did when Tony's son died. And one of the, I don't know how close Toni and Jesse were, but I knew that they liked each other. And I got in touch with Miss Norman. I didn't know her, but I got in touch with Miss Norman to ask her if she would love to be a part of this. She was in Denmark, unfortunately. And she wrote back and said, I'm in Denmark, I can't possibly come. And I was really very sad. And then I knew that Toni was very close to Leontine Price. And I got in touch. I did know Miss Price. We didn't hang out, but I knew Miss Price. And so I got in touch with Miss Price. She's in an old folks home. There must be a better word, but that's where she still is. And I said, Miss Price, we would love to have you come, because I know what you mean to Toni. She's the only person I know that Toni ever, really said I'm close to, that she. And I said, it would just mean so much. And she said, I can't sing anymore. And I said, Miss Price, I don't think it matters. I mean, I don't think your voice is what we are looking for, it's your presence. And it's one of those things I do all the time. You know, it's like, do I say this slower or louder? You know, I can't sing anymore. And I realize that whatever Leontine Price thinks of herself, it all is connected to that voice. And so I recognize that we're not going to get it. And I told Toni, I said, I'm just so sorry Miss Price is not with us. And she said, oh, I understand, because she did. You know, that's one of the things. As I said, I didn't know Miss Hooks, but I knew those other ladies. But I'm not really all that spiritual. But when Toni died, you know, and then I almost have to say when her body died. And that was incredibly sad to me. I just couldn't handle it. I was amazed that I was as sorry as I was. But you know, Miss Norman died 3 weeks later. And I said to my friend Jenny, who's having some other issues, but I said to Jenny, you know, I think that Toni went to heaven and realized I need some music. And she called, she said, you know,
come on, Jesse.
Come on, Jesse, I want to. But you know, Jesse Norman, you know, Jesse Norman was born in one part of Macon, and James Brown was born in the other.
Wow.
And you have to say to yourself, how does a crappy little city like Macon, Georgia, end up with two of the most important voices? I mean, it's amazing. But you know, it was I think that Miss Norman died about 3 weeks after Toni. So I know they're sitting up there, you know, laughing at us or something. It's an amazing thing. And I'll say one other quick thing, I'll shut up. But you all in college, as we in college, it's good to learn something. So I'm going to recommend learn something. But I'm going to remind you that you're not here to learn. Because if you're just going to go to get a job, if that's what you're here for college, if that's what you're trying to do, Amazon will teach you how to tape a package, because that's where you'll end up. Right. So that's up to you. But I want to remind you, when you graduate, there has to be a reason. And you writers in this room, you who are writers, there's a reason that people throw their hats up. And I think it's because we know that our ancestors are sitting up in heaven, looking down saying, my baby has a degree, because they were not allowed. So when you throw that hat up, think about your ancestors. Think about 200 years ago. Your great-great-great-grandmother sitting there in her wheelchair, smoking, because they all smoked, and saying, that's my baby. See, my baby graduated. My baby has a degree. And that's why you graduate, because you're not here to learn to get a job. You're here for the people who were not allowed to read and write. And you're here to graduate because they did not allow those people to have a degree. And that's why you're here. You're here to get your degree. And I guess that's why I went back to Fisk. Yeah. Because I owe that to my great-grandmother. I owed something more than my arrogance. So that when I threw my hat up, we called her Mama Dear. Mama Dear could look down and say, well, Nikki made it. Because that's who you answer to. You answer to your ancestors. Because you're always going to have something to eat and someplace to sleep. That's just not something. You're Prairie View. You're a part of a family, no matter how it goes. And you can walk up in place, I'm Prairie View student. Somebody's going to let you in. But you're here to answer those people sitting in heaven who are so proud that my baby has a degree. And if you keep that in mind, it really makes a lot more, and it did to me. It made a lot more sense. So that's what I wanted to.
Do you want to say something about Bell Hooks?
I'll say that she absolutely is one of the most brilliant, but also I'm rereading, I think his name is Andrew, right? The student I met with.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I can't remember.
So for Andrew, I'm rereading All About Love.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate everybody who's read Bell Hooks, you know, Feminism is for Everybody, or Killing Rage, or any of these essays where she's talking about what it means to be a Black woman, about our right to assert ourselves, about how we challenge white supremacy just in our bodies, just in our being. You know, that's really, really important, and she speaks to me differently. I've told the story many times about how it was reading bell hooks that made me, so when I was in graduate school, one of my white girlfriends, Gail, were walking out of class, and we were talking about something we had read in the class, and Gail looks at me and she goes, yeah, so for us feminists, and I looked at her and I said, I ain't no feminist. I want a man to open the door for me, right? Because that's what I thought feminism was. Mm-hmm. And then I read feminism is for everybody. Mm-hmm. And bell hooks defines it so clearly. Feminism is a movement to end sexism and sexist oppression. Okay, well, it doesn't say you can't have men opening doors or paying for dinner, right? So I guess I am a feminist. So it spoke to me. She spoke to me differently. But all about love, one of the things that I think bell hooks does that very few intellectuals have the ability to do, you do it though, is marry intellectualism with feeling, with emotion, with, you might say you're not spiritual, but anybody who reads you feels your spirit, with soul. You know, if we want to.
Truth is on the way is the whole gospel.
But it's the moving from here as well as here.
Right.
That I think that bell hooks reminds us we have an obligation to do. Yeah.
And I think that's what both of you really represent. That is the call for us all to be our authentic selves, whatever that authentic looks like, right? And I think more than anything, what you all tell us is that you don't just end up one day a thing. You have to work at it. You have to do it. You have to practice it. And so you might at some point be a writer, but the way you become that writer is that you actually write. And you might be an activist, and the way that you become an activist is that you actually resist and stand up for things. And so thank you so much, I think, for being here and talking to our students. We're running out of time, that's why I'm gonna ask one question that's pressing. Anybody got a question? Yes, Peyton.
Hello, thank you ladies for just pouring into us and being here and just giving us so much knowledge. But my question is, as a writer, I heard you say you don't listen, you don't take other people's opinions, correct? And growing up, it reminded me, I think everyone's been through that stage where, oh, I don't care. But as an artist and as a creator, how do you still make sure that your work is not stagnant and that you continue to grow when you don't really look for other people's validation or their opinions when it comes to your work?
Okay. The one thing you have to remember as a writer, now other artists can do other things, you are your first audience. If it's not pleasing you, it's not any, no matter what anybody else says, it doesn't matter. And I said, I don't like opinions because I don't. I don't want somebody telling me, oh, you shouldn't have done that or you can't do it. But I have read it and I know, oh, this is a piece of crap. And I tear it up. I'm not one who works on there. You won't see anything of mine when my papers are in Mughal Memorial Library in Boston. And one of the reasons that I'm glad that I did what I did, I didn't get any money or anything like that from them, but for my second book on, and that was what, 1987 or something, Howard Gottlieb had invited me to put my papers at the Mughal. And I'm so glad I did now. I've got a room that's really full of, because I send my box up. I send a big box up about every 6 weeks. It's every 6 months, and it's closed until I pass. Mm-hmm. So I have letters from friends, letters from Toni. I have a lot of things up there. Some of them are personal, and I don't want to be bothered with. But what you're asking is, how do you know? Because I don't fool myself. I'm not. I'm not going to fool myself. I was speaking in Utah, of all the places. I was invited to Utah, my last book, because I haven't been doing book tour. So I don't know what you know about Utah, but I was probably the only black person in the whole damn state. I probably was. And they asked me to speak to I was speaking to a high school, and they had bought it in. And so it was like 300 high school students. And they're wondering, why do we have to listen to this black poet? Why are we here? And so you're watching everybody, because everybody lives on their phone. And I said to them, I'm Nikki Giovanni, I'm a poet. And I said, I know you're wondering why you're here. Nobody's looking at it. I said, you're here because I'm brilliant. Yeah. I just thought I should. And they looked up, because nobody's going to talk to them like that. And I said, you should know that the reason that I'm brilliant is that I write poetry. So now it's like, oh, why you know that I'm brilliant, that I write poetry, is that I write good poetry. I write bad poetry. And I write exceptional poetry. What makes me brilliant is that I know the difference. And so I do. I know what's good. And some of the poems, I'm sitting here, some of these poems are not all that good, but I like them. So if you don't want to listen to them, the door was open when you came in, the door's open now. I don't lock you in. And you know what you've written. So don't sit there and fool yourself. This is no good. Don't sit there and fool yourself that this is brilliant. Sit there and say, this is what I wanted to write. And I am a space freak. I'm amazed. I'm amazed that ego tripping, and I'm so pleased, has done what it's done. But that's a part of it, was history.
Right.
That's just history. And we still have the century star that falls into the pyramid. And if they quit blowing up the Middle East, you'd be able to see it better. But I've also been interested when we look at Mary, and I'm a fan of Mary's, and I'm a fan of the donkey. I contribute to the donkeys. There's a donkey farm here because people don't like the donkey. But last Monday, the donkeys were carrying Jesus in. It was so important, they didn't want his donkey to walk on. They had the palms, right? But we know that Mary was on the donkey, right? And Joseph, and I'm not against Joseph, but Joseph didn't have sense enough to, you couldn't see your damn wife is pregnant and that you're going to need to have a reservation in a hotel or something. You knew that. So they finally get to go pay their, right? And so Mary's having a baby. Now, it's a couple of things that's going to happen. For those of us who have not had babies, this won't make any sense, but having a baby is no fun. It's difficult. And in doing that, Mary didn't have a midwife. So now she's in the manger with a cow, some donkeys, some other animals, some bigger animals. She's there. Cows are nice because so everybody's trying, they do. They're comforting her, they're keeping her warm. She has the baby, but now we have a baby that is connected to its mother by a umbilical cord. The cow can't help her because cows don't do that. The donkeys can't help her. They don't do that. There's nothing in that manger that can help her but the mice. And the mice had to be looking at Mary. They were thinking, we're just mice. We're unimportant. But then they realized we're the only person that can chew the umbilical cord off and save both of those lives. So the mouse decided, though I am just a little mouse and unimportant, it did its job. But we know that Jesus was born at midnight because it came upon a midnight clear, that wonderful day, right? And so now we have an umbilical cord. We have saved Mary's life and we have saved Jesus's life. But the cord is there and we know we have to get the cord out because if we don't get it out of the manger, we know that we're going to have ants. It's going to be a lot of ugly things that's going to come in. So the bats who fly at midnight, and I'm very fond of bats. Everybody's always mad at the bat. But the bats looked down and said, we're bats and nobody likes us, but we have to help clean up the manger. And it's the bats that picked up the cord. Now they tell us, and it's because their language is bad, because they don't translate. They tell us that there was a star, that the shepherds saw the star. But the stars have been the same for thousands of years. What they saw was the bats flying the umbilical cord. What they saw was that brilliance in the sky, and that's what the three wise men studied. They did, because the stars haven't changed, they still haven't changed. But they saw that cord, and they said, he has come. It's a fabulous thing. And so if you're reading your New Testament, and you're thinking, because you're a writer, damn it, and you're thinking, what is making sense here, and how could this have happened, and what should have happened? That's what writers do. That's what you do. You have to think it through. I would put as a mother who had an umbilical cord caught, taken off, you know that. So the three shepherds, the shepherds and the three wise men are all looking at the sky and seeing something. But they're not seeing stars because the stars don't change. So they had to see the message from God that said, Jesus has arrived, and they follow him. Now, I happen to be a Christian, so those who aren't, it's fine. I'm not into your religion, whatever makes you happy. But it's only logical that the little mice, who we don't like, saved his life. It's only logical. And we are, with the mice, we are the little people that nobody understands, that we are doing our job. And maybe nobody, even today, is giving us credit for the job that we're doing. But we continue to do our job. And nobody can poison us, shoot us, or get us down. Nobody can tell us that we're ugly. Nobody can tell us that we're dumb. Nobody can tell us to get out. We are the mice who do our job. And we know that he has come.
We're going to end right there. I think that's a great place to stop. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Is there something after this? I don't know. We now bring up Dr. Thomas Smith for closing remarks.
Won't keep you long. Hey, has this been amazing?
Thank you.
You heard the term writers in residence. You heard the term activists in residence. When you think about in residence, what does that, what does it connote? You bring someone to live in your home, to be in your place. In residence means that they are going to share your abode. They'll be a part of your place. We are absolutely just thrilled to have you become a part, you too, become a part of this place, our place. And it's so refreshing not to just hear a bunch of theorems or somebody ish out a bunch of maxims or whatever, but aphorisms, but you share with us a constellation of experiences, a constellation of perspectives, and then you know, and the creativity. You were sitting there, because I'm still trying to figure out this last story you told us in there. What, this umbilical cord? I'll be tonight trying to figure out, is there anywhere where that's scientifically proven, or is that a Nikkiism, or so funny. But seriously, this is one of the experiences for our students, because as we said at the program last night, at the Ensemble in Houston, it's very clear that the place of, and I know when we talk about disciplines, you know, you don't know, because Francis Bacon said there's no such animal, there's no such thing, you know, you kind of codified knowledge in different components, you know, for the convenience of record keeping and whatever. But the truth is, there's an intermingling, there's a relationship between, you know, each body of knowledge. You know, this whole thing is not, it's multidisciplinary, it's whatever. But when you think about social sciences, you think about humanities in those areas, I think that if in our world, more of our people, especially those who are in leadership in our world, had rich experiences, had
in residence, Nikki Giovanni and Melina Abdullah, Ruth Simmons. Had many of them had more of that in their college-going years, I think there would have been a cultivation of the sensibilities in a way that would have caused them to make decisions much differently from the way they made decisions, and to have affected the human race in a different way. And so our business at this university, look out here, you see these students, is to educate our students in a way that is broadening, that has depth, that makes them want to do whatever they do for the good of, the greater good of humanity. And so I want to applaud the students and faculty and staff who have come to this program today. I'm just thrilled that you said yes, each of you, to us. And again, hey, you're at home, right? It's home for you? She does a wonderful job, and I take credit because when she came, she and her sister, she's a twin sister.
I do.
Assistant attorney at the University of Kentucky, I believe. She's got a big chair up there, she's a big shot. She's a big shot here. But they came here looking, all the schools, everybody wanted to go to college. I came up with scholarship money for them that I did not really have.
That's true.
In leadership, you have to ask for forgiveness and not for permission.
Yep.
So I offered scholarship, and then I went to the president to say what I done, and say, you know, if we don't get these two, we can't find a way to get these two to come to Prairie View, then we don't need to be. Maybe we don't need to be this. That's exactly what. And so, hey, the rest is history. But thank you so much, and let us applaud.
So let me say two things before we go. Some of you may be coming in for the master class that's going to happen in this space when we all leave. The other thing is at 4 o'clock, Melina Abdullah will be meeting with students in W.R. Banks 240, and you're welcome, of course, to come to that and finish a conversation with her. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, did you want to say something?
She loves these students, so she's going to say hello to you. Come on down, say hello to her.
Thank y'all so much for coming. See you later.